Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this session, we'll be talking about the communication types that we have in Lightning Web Component, right? So a communication could be child to parent, parent to child, or it could be totally unrelated, right? So I'm pretty sure that while working on the Lightning Web Component, you will at some point of time you will definitely come across the scenarios wherein you would have to create a communication between multiple components that you would be creating, right? So in such cases there could be two things. Either the components are connected to each other via some sort of relationship, right? Let's say a parent child relationship, or they are independent of each other, which you can call as unrelated, right? So in this particular session we will be only covering the second type of communication which I have listed here, which is parent to child. Okay, so basically what happens in parent to child, as the name suggests, right? As the name suggests, parent to child communication happens when the parent component contains the child component tag in its HTML file and passes the data to the child component, right? So let's say you have created two separate Lightning Web Components. The first one is component one, the second one is component two. You can call it as parent and child, right? So now what you want to do is you want to pass some kind of value or some kind of data from the parent LWC component to the child LWC component. So what will you do? You have to basically include your child component in your parent component's template file, right? You have to include the tag for the child component in your parent component's template file, and you have to pass the data. Now the question is, how will you pass the data, right? If you guys remember from the previous session, we talked about two kind of decorators, right? One of them was at the rate track, and then the other was at the rate API, right? So at the rate track is basically used when you want to define a property and you want to only keep it as private, right? Let's say I have created a component, okay, component one, and in that component I go to my JavaScript controller file and I define a property, let's say name, right? And I define it as at the rate track, this particular property. So this name property will only be accessible within this component, right? If there is some other component, I cannot access this property, right? So for that, we would have to use some other decorator, which is at the rate API. So what will you do? You will create you will create a new property in your child component, and you will precede it with at the rate API decorator. Okay. So that will make your property as public, right? So that when you call this particular component, your child component in your parent component, okay, you can pass the data from the parent component to this child component's property and then display it in the child component. Okay, don't try to grasp everything. Let's just go ahead and start with example and you will understand better. Okay, so let me share my Visual Studio Code. So here I will create two components, okay, one parent and one child. So let me create two components, parent component, okay, and then I will also create a child. um, Let me give it as p child so that it will be near to my parent component, right? Just for me to not try and search it. Child comp, okay, and then okay, so I have my, okay, one second. Okay, this is my parent component and this is my p child component. Okay, let me delete these because otherwise it will be confusing for us. So I have deleted these. Okay, now I have two components, which is blank, right? This is my parent component. Okay, I have nothing inside this, and this would be my child component. Okay, so as we talked, right, what am I going to do is I will define a property in my child component. Okay, but I will not initialize that property with anything. Okay, so let's just go ahead and get started. So what will I do here? I will first define it. And if you remember, I told you guys, right, that we have to initialize a property using at the rate API, right? So first of all, I would write in as at the rate API, and then let's just define a value. For example, get value from parent. Okay, get value from parent, and I would have to import this, right, API. So now here I'm not assigning any value to this particular property. Okay, I will fetch the value to this particular property from the parent component. Okay, and we'll see that how we can achieve that. So, and then let's just go to the HTML file, and in HTML file I will just define it as so that we'll be able to identify what is what. So this is my child component, right? Child component. And basically on my child component, what I would want to display. I want to display that property value, right? So, and we do that with the use of curly braces, correct? So here is my get value from parent property, correct? So here, and save it. So if you see, right, this particular property doesn't have a value right now, and I'm trying to display it in the HTML file, which will not give me anything. So what will I do? In my parent component, I'll go and I'll create another property. I will initialize a value to that property, and I will pass that value to the to this value, okay, while calling this component in the parent component. So let's just go to the parent component and go to the HTML file. Okay, so in HTML file, what I have to do is, let's just first go ahead to the JS file and define another value which will have some assignment. Okay, so let me just call it as value, and then I will give it as value from parent. Okay, and that's it. Okay, and then I will be passing this value to this particular property. Okay, and how I can do that? Let's just go to HTML and then see how we can do that. So first of all, let's just name it as okay. So let me just label it as parent component. Okay, and here what I have to do now is I have to call the child component and pass this value, right? Which value? This value I have to pass to which property? To this property, right? So let's just go ahead and do that. Okay, so what I have to do is I will be calling the component by C hyphen and then my child component, right? So I will have my child component and then space. Now what is the property? What is the property name? The property name is get value from parent, right? This is my property name, get value from parent. So let me just copy it and go here and let me paste this. Okay, and then I will put in is equals to, and then I have to assign what? I have to assign this value, right? So this value. Now there's one thing which you have to be careful while you are calling your any of your component inside any other component, right? So for example, this particular property, so in LWC, whenever you're defining a property, right, and when you're calling that property somewhere in, let's say, in some other component, right? So what you have to do is with before every capital letter you have to put a hyphen and you have to convert the capital letter to the small letter, right? So what will I do? Where in all we have the capital letter V starting with the capital letter F and then P, right? So what I have to do is I have to first, before the capital letter, I have to put a hyphen and then I have to convert this capital to small. The same thing I have to do with from. So I'll put a hyphen and then I'll put it as from. Okay, and the same thing I'll do with this, and then here it as parent, right? The error is gone, correct? And similarly, right, if let's say if I would have named my child component as child and capital C and OMPONENT in the small letters, then how would I have called this component? I would have called this component something, if the name would have been something like this, just imagine. So how I would have called this? I would have called this like this. Okay, but I have kept everything as small, so there's no need to convert the name. Okay, so let's just keep it this way and save it. Okay, so okay, let's just go through everything whatever we did and then we can deploy this code and we'll run and check how it's working. Okay, so what I did, I created a child component. Okay, in my child component I have declared a property and I have not assigned any value to it, right? But I'm trying to display this value in my HTML file, in my template file, right? So I have not assigned anything here, but I'm passing a value to this particular property from my parent component. Okay, so let's just go to the parent component and see how we have done that. Okay, so what we did that in our JavaScript controller file, we have another property wherein we have assigned a value. Okay. And then this value we will be assigning to the property which we have created in the child component. Okay. So while calling the child component, you just have to define the property which is there in the child component and assign it with the value that you have into your from your parents JS controller. Okay. And then this should work. Now what we'll do, let's just go ahead and first of all change the meta file. Okay. And I will only be using it on the record page. And let me copy this and here. Okay. Okay, so before we deploy these and check it on the record page, let's just go ahead and check everything one more time. Okay, so this was the child component. I had this value and then JS file. Okay, and this was my parent component, right? I have the value and then parent component, and I'm calling okay, so the name is different, right? This is the wrong name. This is our child component, so it should be p child comp. So p child comp. Okay, and save it. Now let me deploy both the files. Okay, and this one as well. Now I will go to my record page and 1 second. What's my component name? Parent comp, right? Okay, this is from another example, but something similar. Parent comp, right? And let me save this. Okay, so what we have done, we have included the parent component in the record page, right? And what it is doing in the parent component, if you see the HTML file of the parent component, right? What it is doing, it is showing us this label, right? This header of parent component, and then it is calling the child component. And what and all do we have in the child component? We had another header, right? Child component, and then we are passing this value, right? That's what we were doing in the child component, right? So if you go here, check here, so it is also showing us this header, and then this value, it is also displaying us this value. All the values coming from the parent, right? So here, right? So this is displaying the child component header, and then also the value that you're displaying in the child component, but which is coming from the parent component. Okay, so this is how in LWC you can achieve parent to child communication, right? In our next session, we'll talk more about child to parent communication, and we'll also do some examples to understand better. Till then, stay tuned. Bye bye.